I'm here to talk about how BP overcame outsourced obstacles with Cryon process discovery. My name's Steve Sutton. I'm a business process management consultant lead within BP's Business Process Management Centre of Excellence. I've been using business process management tools for more than 16 years and so delighted when we managed to get Cryon on board. So I'll tell you more about that as we go through our journey and the story of how BP is using Cryon. Today, I'd like to take you why BP chose a robotic process discovery tool, our journey from start to where we are now, and then how we look forward in the next steps that we're looking forward to. So why did BP want a robotic process discovery tool? Strategically, BP chose to bring back in-house activities that were being performed by an outsourced provider. They've been doing that for a number of years, and therefore the knowledge of how those activities are being performed had been lost from BP. Therefore, to mitigate the risk of bringing that work back in-house and the knowledge of how those activities have been performed, we wanted a tool that would enable us to capture what our outsourced provider was actually doing and not just what they were handing over in terms of documentation. The scale of that was the effect of 1,600 full-time equivalent employees' activities being brought back in-house from the outsourced provider. We also wanted to accelerate our process documentation creation, but also at a lower level of detail than we've ever done before. Typically, our standard operating procedures or desktop procedures were done at a relatively high level that were generalized and standard across the organization. But in reality, at the procedural level, because we operate on multiple legacy systems, there are many ways of performing those activities. By using Cryon, we were able to capture that level of detail and variance at the level that would enable us to map those processes and create standard documentation. The tool we were using to create our training videos was also at the end of its useful economic life. So that gave us our third reason to look for a robotic process discovery tool, and one that had the ability to create training videos. Our journey to date with Cryon has been a short one in terms of it's been less than a year. However, it's been an effective one. We've taken 4 upgrades during that time, and each upgrade has provided additional functionality that has driven increased productivity in using the tool from BP perspective. We have large volumes of data that have been recorded through the robotic process discovery, and we're going to look at those figures shortly. I'd also like to point out the great partnership that we've created between BP and Cryon. Each one of those 4 upgrades that we've taken was driven from requirements that BP provided. It's great that Cryon was able to bring those into the core product and not just provide a bespoke solution for BP. Maybe the most significant one from our perspective was the ability to start a robot, perform an activity, and stop the robot. This is not how Cryon was obviously designed because it bypasses the discovery piece. However, it has enabled us to collect discrete pieces of process for documentation and guide me video purposes. It also saves the amount of resource that's required to review processes, particularly where those reviewing it were not the SME or subject matter expert that were actually performing the activities in the first place where the robots were deployed. Where we had deployed them on third-party machines, that was key. Our journey in numbers. Over the time that we've had Cryon, we have deployed over 350 robots, and that number is increasing daily. Those robots have been split over 58 tenants or projects. Not all of them have been the result of the insourcing project. We have several small projects on the go that are looking either at creating those Guide Me videos for additional training purposes, or creating documentation where we did not have previously either processes documented or documentation for those processes. It equates to over 8,100 recordings and 13.6 million actions or screenshots, a significant amount of data, which we're now starting to analyze. We can view all that data in our app site's dashboard. Here we have the high-level screen, which shows us effectively what we have been doing in Cryon to date. With all our tenants, our processes, and the recorded sessions, you can see there's a significant amount of data in there. And we have subsequent dashboards that enable us to drill down through each tenant to look at the applications, the time they've spent in those applications, and the functionality that was being performed, i.e. whether they've been using the keyboard, mouse click, and when they've been using a mouse click, what sort of functionality they were doing, i.e. right mouse click, left mouse click, copy, paste, or scroll, which provides huge amount of insights into how those processes have been performed. One of the biggest insights that we've found out of analyzing the data through the dashboards is the amount of time and effort spent in non-core applications as part of the day-to-day processes. Significantly, this has been in Excel, in Outlook, so email communication, or in Teams, again, a form of communication used as well as document storage within BP. This has provided us with further insight we are now deep diving into to understand why so much activity and time is spent outside the core applications to perform those activities. In terms of where BP goes next, as I said, we've got a significant amount of data that we are reviewing at the moment, and we're reviewing that for a number of reasons. Firstly, for process improvement, we're looking to see where we can improve the process by eliminating unnecessary or redundant steps in the process. Because of the way BP has grown up, we often have many legacy systems and many ways of doing the same process, even within the same business unit. Therefore, we want to eliminate unnecessary variance to those processes. We're also looking for opportunities to automate and simplify the process so that we can move to a single standard way of doing it where possible across the business. We're also looking to utilize the Guide Me videos where we have those repetitive processes and a high turnover of staff in the centres that perform those activities, so that we don't have to spend the time training those individuals and they can have an attended bot deployed to walk them through those Guide Me videos. Finally, we're looking at robotic process automation. So utilizing Cryon Studio's functionality to automate the processes that we have discovered in a low-code format. Let me leave you with some of my tips on how we've been using Cryon over the last year. First of all, I recommend you get the right resource up front. Now, BP maybe has been in a unique situation in that we were primarily using the initial functionality to capture the processes from an outsourced provider. Therefore, those people reviewing those processes were internal to BP and not the people that had done the robotic process capture in the first place. However, it really is important that you have the right resource to review those processes that are being captured. Secondly, when you divide your tenants and your projects up, consider the number of users you have in each project, the duration of the time that they're spending recording, and the number of processes each of those users are expected to capture. Screenshots soon add up, and the number of actions should be kept below 500,000. So you might want to consider breaking your tenants down into maybe lower levels than you first thought. And finally, the introduction of our manual agile approach, so the ability to start and stop the robot, does not preclude you from using the discovery element. So if you have significant numbers of users providing the same activity, you can capture all the variants and discover the processes rather than just using the start-stop process alone. Thank you very much for listening.